Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to Constantinople, back when it still pulsed with robed bureaucrats, sandal-footed scholars, and that heavy smell of melting tallow and wet wool. You're about to step into the sandals of a man no one would notice today, yet without whom empires would forget how to spell their own names. A Byzantine librarian. Picture this. The year is somewhere around 1024 AD, give or take a reign or two. The empire still calls itself Roman, and you are not a soldier, not a priest, not a merchant. You are the silent guardian of scrolls and inkpots, a quiet node in the great neural web of medieval memory. You probably won't survive the next plague, fire, or minor palace intrigue. But hey, you're immortal as long as your marginalia stays legible. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyelids flicker open just before dawn. The chamber is cold, damp stone underfoot. A pale blue light leaks through the wooden shutters, and your breath fogs in the air. It always does in late spring. Byzantine stone architecture holds its chill like a grudge. The cot you sleep on creaks as you shift your weight. Your wool blanket has slipped to the floor, and you fumble for it with your feet before giving up and standing. Cold, your toes hate you. You mutter something half holy and half grumpy under your breath as you reach for your tunic, thick with wear and mended thrice over. You're not poor exactly. You're state-employed. Outside, bells clang softly from the nearby monastery, calling monks to matins. You have your own rituals. Your chamber smells of ink and ash. A small crucifix hangs beside a narrow shelf filled with hand-copied psalters and one prized volume, a cracked, gold-leafed Pliny the Elder. The cover is warped from a past flood. The irony is not lost on you. Pliny, who wrote so much about nature, almost drowned in your leaky library last Lent. You stretch, hearing a quiet pop from your spine, then pad over to a ceramic basin tucked on a bench. The water inside is glacial. It was drawn last night, left to sit and settle. You splash your face. Instant regret. Instant wakefulness. You chew a corner off a stale barley loaf left on the sill. It's dry as sand, but you dunk it in water and it softens enough to tolerate. You had a dream last night, something about a runaway codex being chased through the hippodrome by barking eunuchs. Maybe it was the cabbage stew. You dress fully now, long wool tunic, rope belt, cloak draped over your shoulder, sandals laced tight. You check for the essential tools, knife for sharpening quills, a pouch of salt to clean ink stains, and your iron library key. The key weighs more than you'd expect, it always has. You step outside, the city is just beginning to stir, smoke curls up from rooftop chimneys. A street cat glares at you from a rain barrel and flicks its tail. This one's claimed your street corner since Epiphany. A rooster crows somewhere distant, defiantly. You wrap your cloak tighter. Walking through Constantinople before sunrise is eerie and oddly peaceful. The mosaics on church walls shimmer faintly in the low light, and you swear the statues blink when no one looks. You pass a wine cellar scrubbing yesterday's grime from his counter, and a woman tossing breadcrumbs to pigeons with theological intensity. Your route to the Great Palace skirts the hippodrome's outer walls. Broken columns lean like tired men. History lies here, layered like baklava. Sometimes you feel it humming beneath your feet, Byzantium, Rome, even old Greek Byzantian whispering up from the stones. A small boy runs past you carrying firewood, chased by a dog with a stolen fig. You smirk. It's good to see something outrun fate for once. Finally, the massive bronze-plated doors of the palace library come into view. You know the guards by name, Nicetas, who once tried to translate Aristotle out loud and fell asleep mid-syllogism, and Leo, who collects cursed coins for study. They nod silently and let you pass. The corridor to the scriptorium echoes with your footfalls. Dust motes float like tiny ghosts in the torchlight. You pass a locked chamber where forbidden texts are kept, supposedly heretical, though one's just an old cookbook that recommended lentils with rosewater. Dangerous stuff. You reach the library doors. You draw your key, feel its teeth catch in the old mechanism. It resists. You mutter a prayer to St. Catherine, patroness of scholars, and the door gives way with a familiar groan. Darkness. You inhale the scent, vellum, lamp oil, and old sweat. You step inside and let the door thud shut behind you. The world of emperors and eunuchs is gone. This is your kingdom. You light the first lamp. The flame flutters, then steadies. You walk down the main aisle, lighting more as you go, pools of warm gold spreading across shelves of ancient scrolls, leather-bound tomes, and loose parchments stacked precariously like academic Jenga towers. There's that faint squeaking again. You freeze, and then spot it. A mouse, bold and plump, darting under the copyist's bench. Probably the same one that chewed the corner off your Epictetus last winter. You make a note to set a trap again, but for now, you sit. The library breathes around you, old and living. You remove your writing tools, sort your desk, and begin the day's record-keeping. Ink recipes, book loans, scroll conditions. Your handwriting is neat, precise, and barely legible to anyone else. You pause. The dawn outside blooms slowly, peach and grey behind narrow windows. Somewhere a bell tolls again. You're not a hero, you're not famous, but you are the quiet engine of memory, and you're exactly where you need to be. Section 2. You shift on the creaky stool, fingers stiff from the morning chill, and glance toward the open parchment in front of you. An inventory of scrolls last updated when the emperor still had all his teeth. A small inkwell rests beside it, sealed with a scrap of wax to keep the bugs out. You pop it open with your thumbnail and immediately regret it. The scent of stale oak gall punches your sinuses like a monk in a fasting mood. First task of the day, washing, not spiritual washing, literal face still numb from the first splash kind of washing. You make your way to the small utility alcove behind the scriptorium wall. It's really just a corner with a basin and a bench, dimly lit by a narrow slit window that seems to enjoy making everything look slightly more miserable than it actually is. The water's still cold. You splash your face again out of ritual, and not because it helps. You grab a rough linen towel and scrub at your cheeks. At least you're awake now. Or something like it. Back at your desk, you tear a fresh chunk of barley bread from the wrinkled cloth sack you brought from home. It's yesterday's loaf, again. But hey, if it's not growing fur, it's good enough. You chew slowly, quietly watching dust float in the air, and try to ignore the tiny flake of stone that every Byzantine loaf seems to come with for added crunch. Outside, the sun's higher now. It casts long shafts of light through the slit windows, picking out flecks of gold on manuscript bindings and throwing exaggerated shadows across your work table. The library feels like a church, minus the chanting and plus a lot more muttering about ink prices. Your breakfast companion this morning is a fly, not a small unassuming fly. No, this is one of those smug palace flies, fat from too many spilled ink pots and leftover figs. You try to wave it off gently. It tries to land on your bread. You consider reading a curse from the Sibylline collection just to make a point. Eventually it leaves, probably offended. There's a certain calm in these early moments. The scribes aren't here yet. The copyist benches are empty. The only sound is the occasional pop from the hearth in the far corner and the scratching of your own quill as you note today's date in the inventory register. The year you write is indeterminate. As always, the reign of Basil II ended years ago, but it still lingers in documents because no one wants to update the forms. Bureaucracy never dies, it just forgets to file itself. You inspect a damaged codex, a commentary on Galen's medicinal teachings that's recently come back from the city hospital's library. The spine is cracked, a corner chewed, mouse again, and a strange red stain covers several pages. Wine, blood. Pomegranate? Historians still argue whether Byzantine libraries suffered more damage from invading armies or from clumsy doctors with unwashed hands. You fetch a bit of powdered chalk and lightly brush the parchment. The stain lightens. Slightly. You'll send it to the restoration desk, currently manned by Ioannis, a man whose repair strategy mostly involves gluing things and praying to St. Menace. You take another bite of bread and sigh. The sun inches higher, and with it, the sounds of the palace awaken. Somewhere a guard drops a spear, a clerk sneezes, a pair of doves flap by the window. Life begins to rustle in the stone bones of the capital. Then come the footsteps. You hear them before you see them. Slow, dragging, rhythmic like reluctant monks at a morning sermon. The scribes are arriving. The first through the door is Theophilus, still half asleep and smelling faintly of goat butter. He nods in your direction but says nothing, his way of declaring he's not emotionally prepared for speech. He settles at his bench and stares at a blank sheet like it just insulted his mother. Then comes Maria, already bickering with Alexios before she even crosses the threshold. "If you abbreviate ecclesia like that again, I swear I'll report you to the patriarch," she mutters. Alexios rolls his eyes. "We all agreed on the double-looped E. You agreed?" The rest of us were still trying to sharpen our pens. You rub your temples. These two have been fighting for so long that some of their arguments have footnotes. Others trickle in. Demetrios, who smells of garlic and ink, and Basil, who once copied an entire psalter upside down and swears it was an artistic experiment. By now the scriptorium is humming with the rustle of parchment, the quiet scraping of quills, and the occasional sigh of a scholar realizing they've just spelled Jesus with 2 S's. You distribute today's work assignments with the diplomacy of a minor noble juggling a tax revolt and a wine shortage. Maria gets Chrysostom. She's happy. She likes the golden boys. Theophilos takes the herbal texts. He won't complain. He doesn't speak until after second bell. The real challenge is finding someone to work on the Emperor's genealogy chart, which is half finished and already contradicts itself in 3 places. You end up assigning it to Basil. He won't fix it, but he'll finish it. You settle back at your desk and glance toward the locked cabinet behind you, the one holding the fragile scrolls brought back from the Eastern campaigns. Among them is a Greek translation of a Sasanian astronomical treatise that's as dense as a lead-plated loaf of rye. You were supposed to proof it last week. You're still pretending it doesn't exist. Outside, the bells of Hagia Sophia begin to ring. The deep, resonant tones vibrate through the stone walls like a heartbeat. You take another bite of your bread. It hasn't gotten any softer. A fly buzzes past again, or maybe it's a new one. Maybe they're forming a guild. You make a note in your log. Bread still hard, scribal morale low. Maria may commit ecclesiastical violence soon, and so the day creeps onward. Section 3. You hear the meow before you see the tail. Turning your head toward the arched doorway, you spot it. The palace street cat, the one with the torn ear and a limp in his right hind leg. He's sauntering in like he owns the place, and technically, in a city like Constantinople, he probably does. He pauses, assesses the room, and hops onto a stool with regal disdain. Maria glares at him. "He sat on my quill box yesterday," she mutters, but makes no move to stop him. None of you do. Superstition runs deep in this place, and everyone knows. Disturbing a library cat invites disaster. Whether it's spilled ink or a surprise plague, no one wants that on their conscience before lunch. You resume sorting through the scroll requests from yesterday. 2 requests for Gregory of Nazianzus, 1 for a repaired copy of Euclid's Elements, and 1 strange note in a shaky hand asking whether the library possesses any diagrams of dragons anatomically correct. You sigh. Probably that young student from the Blackerneye district again. He's been obsessed ever since he misread a reference in the Physiologus. Still, you mark it down. Can't say no to curiosity. Outside, bells echo again, this time the soft rolling clang from a distant convent tower. They mark mid-morning. You roll your shoulders and look down at the wax tablet in front of you. There's a small pile of updated accession records beside it, each entry a snapshot of empire, tax rolls, homilies, medicine, even love poetry if you know where to look. There's something oddly beautiful about it, this silent flood of ink across time. You're not writing history, you're preserving it. Filing it, making sure some emperor's cousin's medical treatise on fig poultices survives long enough to be mocked by scholars 3 centuries later. You stand, stretch again, and walk over to the far wall, where high shelving holds some of the oldest works. You run your fingers along their spines, smooth, brittle, papyrus rolls in leather cases, codices wrapped in linen, some bound with tiny bronze clasps. You stop at a codex written in Coptic, found in an abandoned monastery near Thebes and rumoured to contain apocryphal sayings of Jesus. Of course, that rumour was started by a monk who couldn't actually read Coptic. Historians still argue whether any of these sayings are authentic. Some even claim the whole thing was an elaborate forgery by a scribe with a drinking problem and a talent for mimicking old scripts. You're distracted by a noise, a soft click, and the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Ah, the imperial translator has arrived. You know this walk. Heavy sandals, deliberate steps, a faint rustle of silk robes. You glance toward the door just in time to see him enter, flanked by 2 junior assistants who look like they'd rather be anywhere else, including a Saracen dungeon. "Good morning," he says without looking at you. placing a wrapped scroll bundle gently, but not too gently, on your desk. This, he continues, is a copy of the Zoroastrian book of Arda Wiraz, translated imperfectly into Syriac and then further imperfectly into Greek. You raise an eyebrow. So it's a double mistranslation? He adjusts his sleeves. Think of it as interpretive. The Emperor wishes for a polished copy in our formal Greek script for his private library. That task now belongs to your scribes. You glance toward Maria, already listening with narrowed eyes. This will require quiet, he adds, loudly enough for the room to hear. The sacred themes are not to be trifled with. You nod politely. He leaves the scroll and vanishes like a bad memory. One of his assistants frowns at the cat before being pulled away. Maria raises an eyebrow. So we're translating a translation of a translation? You nod. From Persian to Syriac to Greek. Think of it as cultural embroidery, she snorts, more like blindfolded embroidery. You add the scroll to today's list, marking it with a little star, not a real annotation, just something to remind you to triple-check the copy later. These imperial requests have a way of being urgent until they're forgotten, then urgently remembered just before someone gets exiled. Outside, the sunlight has fully warmed the stones of the window arch. The cat purrs in its corner, flicking its tail and watching the scribes with the amused detachment of a creature that's never once had to translate anything. A breeze stirs the hanging herbs over the scriptorium hearth, lavender and wormwood both meant to keep flies and sickness at bay. Whether they work or not, no one questions it. At least the air smells better. You return to your records. Today's entry, Imperial Commission received for translation of Zoroastrian visionary text. Original script, nearly illegible. Recommend revising Syriac intermediary next winter if scribes still sane. You pause and add, translator appears unaware of library's noise levels, will observe reaction to midday quill fight. The cat meows, Demetrios sneezes, Alexios swears under his breath because he's once again dipped his reed pen in vinegar instead of ink. You don't ask why there's vinegar on his desk. You stopped asking questions like that years ago. At least things are moving along. You sit back, you smile faintly. You are the invisible engine behind a world of thought. And today you've got translations to triple-check, breadcrumbs to sweep, and probably a map of dragons to approve. Just another quiet morning in the life of a Byzantine librarian. Section 4. The key to any ancient library is not knowledge. It's keys. You have 7 of them. Each slightly rusted, shaped like puzzle pieces from a forgotten board game, and tucked inside a pouch you wear beneath your cloak like a nervous bishop guards his last coin, one for the outer door. One for the scroll vault, one for the scriptorium's lamp cupboard, one for the locked cabinet holding questionable content, mostly erotic poetry, one for the ink storeroom. One for your desk drawer, and one you haven't identified yet, but you're convinced unlocks the heart of some long-lost bureaucratic dimension. Today, you're using the scroll vault key. The corridor beyond the scriptorium hums with echoes, stone on stone, footfall on ancient dust. You pass under an arch depicting St. Basil holding a scroll in one hand and gesturing disapprovingly with the other. You like to imagine he's judging your posture. You pause in front of the iron-bound vault door. The lock's been cranky lately. It sticks in cold weather and sulks in hot weather. You jiggle the key with the finesse of someone who's done this 1,000 times while whispering, "Don't embarrass me in front of the saints." It clicks. Barely. Inside, darkness, then smell, aged vellum, candle wax, mouse fur, and the unmistakable aroma of forgotten dreams. You take a moment before lighting the lamp. Even in darkness, you know where everything is. Scroll tubes stacked like panpipes along the stone shelves, codices in leather wraps, some embossed with gold, others with scribbled notes from long-dead librarians. One shelf is dedicated entirely to damaged texts, the crippled choir, as you call it. The lamp flares to life. You begin your morning inventory. Each scroll gets a once-over. Is the binding intact? Any mold? New bite marks? You run your fingers along the spines, noting wear and tear. A volume of Proclus is shedding flakes like a molting goose. The Tactics of Leo VI has gained another ink blot right on the bit about outflanking enemy cavalry. Could be sabotage. More likely, Basil's elbow. You find one of your personal favourites, a collection of letters exchanged between 2 6th-century scholars arguing over whether the soul resides in the chest or the liver. One of them includes a passionate diagram of internal organs that looks suspiciously like a loaf of bread. Historians still argue whether this diagram was serious or a subtle act of sarcasm by an underappreciated anatomist. As you lift a damaged scroll out of its cradle, a sheet of loose parchment flutters free. You catch it mid-air, just barely. It's covered in annotations, some recent, some ancient. One note in the margin simply reads, "Don't trust the man with the red boots." You pause. You know at least 3 people who fit that description. You set the note aside and make a mental reminder, check for context later, or possibly file it under speculative warnings. A knock breaks the silence, then another. You sigh and replace the scroll carefully before stepping out. At the end of the corridor stands Ioannis, the restoration specialist, holding a wax-smeared bundle like it's a sacrificial offering. "It fell on a candle," he says, deadpan. You raise an eyebrow. "Well, near a candle," he amends, and then onto another manuscript. And then into a bowl of mulled wine. It was a bad moment. You take the bundle and unwrap it. Inside is a charred and vaguely grape-scented portion of a psalter, Psalm 73 to be exact. You know, because it's the 3rd time this month someone's damaged that exact passage. Some monks believe it curses their digestion, others say it brings rain. One scribe claims it summoned frogs, though that may have just been seasonal flooding. You thank Ioannis and set the parchment aside for triage. He offers a shrug and disappears again. You head back toward the main room, passing the cabinet of unclassified items. Inside, 3 broken styluses, a tax ledger from Armenia with marginalia shaped like bunnies, and a cup said to have belonged to John Chrysostom, though you're fairly certain it's just an old soup bowl. As you walk, the building creaks around you, the soft settling of ancient stones, the whisper of breeze through arrow-slit windows. You always imagine the library as a living organism. The vault is its stomach, the scriptorium is the mouth, and You're somewhere between the brain and the spleen, depending on your mood. Back in the main room, the scribes are elbow-deep in ink and complaints. Maria is muttering over her imperial translation, shaking her head with increasing speed. Alexios has spilled something red on his robe and is pretending it's a design feature. Demetrios has fallen asleep upright. Again. You clear your throat, a few glances, some groans. "Let's remember," you say, "that our work today might outlive us all." The cat sneezes loudly. Maria sighs. "Well, that was humbling." You turn to unlock the lamp cupboard, retrieving 2 more oil flasks and a clean taper. The lamps by the northern desk have gone dim, and yesterday's wax formed stalactites of despair down the manuscript margins. One by one you refill the lamps, careful not to drip on the already temperamental ink mixtures. Some are made with soot and wine dregs, some with gallnut and vinegar. One is suspected to be partly composed of fermented eel blood, but no one's willing to confirm. While adjusting the wick of a stubborn lamp, your fingers brush something carved beneath the desk, tiny deliberate letters scratched into the wood. You squint, veritas or nothing. Also, Maria snores. You smile. History isn't always grand pronouncements or gilded covers. Sometimes it's a joke left by a lonely copyist under a splintery workbench. You sit again, back to your records, back to the quiet shuffle of parchment and purpose. You log the damaged psalter, you note the imperial scroll's condition, you update the candle wax incident report. And all the while, the lamps glow, the ink dries, the cat naps, and Byzantium hums faintly around you, old and still, somehow new. Section 5. You fumble slightly as you light the next lamp. Your fingers still slick with a bit of wax from the earlier refill, and the flame stutters before flaring up, casting long golden shadows across the desk. It's the same lamp that always gives you trouble. You swear it's cursed, but in a petty way, like it just enjoys watching you suffer for 3 seconds longer than necessary. One by one, the others around the scriptorium flicker to life. Little orange domes of warmth, breathing light back into the world of parchment and cracked leather. The library awakens not all at once but in stages. First the light, then the soft chorus of brushes and nibs, and then the low tide of muttering complaints. It's like conducting an orchestra that refuses to tune. You look around. Theophilos is sharpening his quill with a small bone-handled knife, his favourite, even though it's technically a fish scaler. He says the grooves help. You suspect he just likes the way it looks when people stare. Maria is already deep into the Zoroastrian scroll, muttering transliterations to herself in an intense whisper that makes the others avoid her end of the table. She stops every few lines to sketch a symbol in the margin. One of them looks suspiciously like a cucumber. You walk to the corner shelves and open the wooden cabinet containing your prized codices. The hinges creak dramatically, and you make a mental note again to oil them. Inside are tomes bound in goatskin, oxhide, and at least one wrapped in something that might be old tapestry. You pull down the Lexicon of Suda, a massive Byzantine encyclopedia that doubles as both reference and blunt weapon. Today it's for checking an obscure Persian word Maria claims refers to divine fire. You lay it open on her desk. She doesn't look up but grunts in appreciation, a rare form of high praise. Back at your seat, you check the logbook. A scribe from the university requested access to a treatise on mechanical automata this afternoon. Probably wants to sketch the hydraulic singing birds again. You flip to the entry and jot a note. Only under supervision. Last attempt led to small fire. The sun filters more boldly through the lattice windows now. Dust motes swirl like drifting stars, dancing in the amber light. You grab the book cleaning cloth from the drawer. It's stiff and smudged, but it'll do. You begin gently brushing one of the older scrolls, Plato's Timaeus, while listening to the room's rhythm. Scribble, sigh. Scribble, whisper, sneeze. Scribble, and then footsteps again, slower this time. You look up and watch as two boys, apprentices, enter sheepishly. Ink-stained hands, patchy robes, the posture of someone caught loitering near the palace kitchens. They carry between them a scroll tube that looks suspiciously bloated. "Master," one says, "we found this behind the scriptorium hearth." You take it. It's warm, strangely so. The leather is cracked, the wax seal half melted. You open it slowly and unroll the parchment, and stare. What you have in your hands is a map. A very bad one. Lines that make no geographical sense, a river that seems to flow uphill into a mountain that's shaped like a fish. Towns with names like Oxalon and Twigar, which appear nowhere in any register. You turn it sideways, then upside down, no improvement. "What is this?" you ask, more out of amusement than anger. The apprentice shrugs. "Someone said it might be Scythia." You look again. In one corner, someone scribbled a creature that might be a camel, or a boot, or an angel. The proportions are wildly off, the scale non-existent, and the legend reads simply, "Beyond here, wickedness." You try not to laugh too hard. You fail. "Well," you finally say, "file it in the curiosity folder." It's art now. You hand it back with a wink, and they beam like they've saved the empire. Back at your desk, you update your marginalia tracking chart. You keep one for fun, collecting strange notes, doodles, side comments. You've got everything from accidental haikus in the margins to what seems to be a full recipe for lentil stew embedded in a gospel commentary. Historians still argue whether Byzantine marginalia were spontaneous expressions or subtle acts of resistance. You're pretty sure it's both. As the morning stretches toward noon, the noise in the scriptorium rises slightly. It always does around this time. Something about ink, hunger, and the collective realization that you've been awake for too long without proper food. Maria stands abruptly and says, "The Zoroastrian soul journey is now climbing a rainbow made of fire." I'm taking a break. No one questions her. You follow suit, stepping outside into the cloister courtyard. The air is bright, the sky cloudless. Distant voices echo from the kitchens. You take a moment to sit beneath the fig tree, a favourite spot. You close your eyes. You let the warmth sink into your cloak. You are surrounded by scrolls that once crossed mountains, deserts, and seas, carried on camels, hidden in monastery walls, crammed into the sleeves of robes, and now they live here. In your hands, in the quiet chaos of your scriptorium, a bird lands nearby. The cat from earlier watches it, tail twitching. You take a deep breath and smile, then back inside. The lamps need trimming, the cucumbers in Maria's margins need clarification, and that map of nowhere, you'll probably frame it, just to remind yourself that not all knowledge needs to make sense to be valuable. Section 6. You hear the first hesitant footsteps before the sun fully clears the palace walls. It's that soft shuffle, mixed with a creak of leather sandals, that signals the scribes are trickling in. The scriptorium, which felt endless and hushed just moments ago, now hums with low voices and the scratch of quills. First through the door is Theophilos, always Theophilos. He appears as if summoned by some magnetic pull toward manuscripts, hair tousled, robe dust-speckled. He carries the morning chill in his bones and greets you with a barely audible, "Ah." No further words are necessary. You know he's pre-fueled only by cold barley and stubborn resolve. Fact: Byzantine scribes often worked in communal spaces, learning shorthand and abbreviations from each other in real time. Fringe tidbit: some claim a handful of scribes used invisible ink composed of crushed snail shells to leave secret messages in margins. Historians still argue whether such inks were practical notes or hazing rituals among apprentices. Behind him, Maria sweeps in, hair wrapped in a simple linen veil, scroll tube cradled under her arm like a precious infant. She murmurs about the translator's scroll, a Persian treatise that now has to be re-rendered perfectly into Greek scriptus elegans. You watch her index finger trace ancient letters on her wrapped parchment, as if memorizing by touch. Alexios follows next, pausing to adjust the inkwell on his bench. He always hears something you don't because he's convinced that the exact pitch of a lamp flame influences the flow of ink. He kneels, shifts the lamp closer, tests it and nods as though he's just discovered fire. Fact: oil lamps in Byzantine libraries were typically fueled with olive oil, sometimes mixed with resin to increase brightness. Fringe tidbit: a rumor persists that a particularly bright lamp formula once caused a scribe to hallucinate heavenly rejoicing. Historians still argue whether that incident was actual divine vision or just sour olives. One by one, the rest arrive. Demetrios, shaking sleep from his shoulders, Basilius, who's already complaining of muscle aches, and two new apprentices, one with ink-stained fingertips and one with flecks of charcoal from correcting a recent map misprint. They find their benches, exchange nods, and settle into a rhythm that hums beneath your careful oversight. You rise and move between desks, overseeing assignments. "Maria, your scroll must be ready by Vespers," you say quietly, tapping the parchment under her arm. "Alexios, check the reed pens in the storeroom. 3 are frayed." To Demetrios, you hand a stack of ecclesiastical decrees that need copying. His face brightens because church law is his comfort zone. A scribe's arrival ritual always includes a moment of chaos. Pens to sharpen, ink to mix, wax to melt for seals, blotting sand to spread. You offer guidance without drawing too much attention. After all, their autonomy fuels their craft. Occasionally you pause to lift a folio, show the right way to crimp the vellum edge, or demonstrate a neat knot for tying scroll bundles. A tension crackles in the air, the midday sun warms the stone walls and the scriptorium grows cozy. Scribes lean closer to lamps, manuscripts buckle slightly in the heat. Theophilos whispers to Maria about a new variant of a rhetorical figure in Cicero's letters, and suddenly half the table is murmuring Latin quotes. Fringe tidbit: a few scribes kept tiny rhetorical dictionaries hidden under benches, filled with tongue-in-cheek mockery of overused tropes. Historians still argue whether those were genuine study aids or humorous diversions to stave off fatigue. Amid the soft tumult, a small figure flits in at the back door. It's Ioannis, the restoration specialist, carrying a tray of fresh ink mixtures. "Try this," he says, placing a tiny vial on your desk. It's oak galls blended with pomegranate tannin, supposed to last longer. You sniff the mixture. It smells faintly like wine and iron. You dip a test quill and scratch a few lines. The ink glides smoothly, no scratchy hiss. You nod in approval. "Fine work," you tell him. He offers a modest bow and retreats, satisfied. Now fully assembled, the scriptorium settles into a collaborative hum. Quills scratch in unison, pages turn, occasional sighs and coughs punctuate the air. A stray cat, we call him Orpheus, ambles in, weaving between stools, inspection mission underway. Scribes pause to stroke his fur. He accepts adoration like the monarch he believes himself to be. Fact: palace libraries often maintained cats to control rodents, offering them food and mild veneration. Fringe tidbit: some librarians believed cats bore the spirits of former scribes, tasked with guarding forgotten words. Historians still argue whether those beliefs influenced the cat's revered status or were later romantic inventions. You step to the central bench, where a large codex lies open. It's a recently acquired commentary on Proclus, written in a cramped hand. You watch as apprentices copy diagrams of Platonic solids, cube, tetrahedron, octahedron, by candlelight. Their hands glow pale in oil lamplight, copying shapes that helped medieval scholars envision abstract geometry. You clear your throat. Reminder, any errors in the Emperor's genealogy scroll, and you'll explain it to the Patriarch himself. A collective shudder ripples through the room. No one wants that fate. Maria flicks an ink blot from her margin and mutters, "Emperor's pride is thicker than our parchment." Laughter ripples softly. You stroll toward the window, leaning on the sill. Through the lattice you glimpse the bustling palace courtyard, guards drilling, merchants bargaining, a distant peal of harpstrings. Then you look back inside at your scribes, resolute, focused, the living pulse of preserved knowledge. Your heart warms. This is your domain, a chorus of quills, a symphony of parchment, each scribe a vital voice, and you, the librarian, conduct the flow, ensuring each note is captured accurately for posterity. You glance at the clockwork-like progress, paragraphs transcribed, diagrams sketched, imperial orders recorded. Your stomach tugs at you. Time for the mid-morning break soon. More barley bread, dried figs, the occasional salted fish offered by grateful monks. But for now, you allow the scriptorium's rhythm to carry you, each breath, each page turned, each quill stroke weaving a tapestry of memory. In this moment, you're not just organizing scrolls, you're orchestrating civilization's heartbeat. Section 7, your fingers drum gently on the edge of the thick parchment ledger, waiting for the ink to dry. The air smells faintly of old leather and warm dust. You glance toward the storeroom door, half hoping no one needs anything too soon. This is the brief window before lunch when things go oddly quiet, when the scriptorium collectively realizes that even knowledge cannot hold back the growl of an empty stomach. It's the perfect time for your least favorite task, the morning inventory. You rise with a sigh, half dramatic, half genuine, and pick up your tally board. A wax tablet with slots for stylus marks, it's your oldest and most trusted companion, even if it's chipped in 2 places and once bore a doodle of a very unflattering monk. You run your finger across the smooth wax, make a fresh groove, and begin. Scroll by scroll, codex by codex, you work your way through the long wooden shelves. You check bindings, seals, scroll ties, shelf numbers, each detail logged in a mind that often feels like it's storing half the Empire's trivia. Occasionally you whisper to the scrolls, as if reminding them to behave. You've been doing this so long that anthropomorphizing them isn't even strange anymore. Fact: Byzantine libraries, especially those in imperial complexes, kept detailed manuscript inventories, sometimes even including descriptions of decorative elements or marginalia. Fringe tidbit: one library in Thessaloniki once reported a theft of 1 scroll of Herodotus, 1 knife, and a mouldy apple. Historians still argue whether such mixed inventories reflected casual theft or just very hungry students. You pause in front of a blank space. You frown. There should be a scroll here, on the composition of air and humours, attributed dubiously to Galen. You remember its fraying red cord, the odd stain shaped like a fish. You even remember moving it last week. You double-check the shelf label, correct? You check the shelf above, then below. Nothing. You sigh again, this time less dramatic, more, here we go. Lost scrolls happen. Usually it's misfiling, occasionally alone, no one recorded. Once, memorably, it had been tucked inside the folds of a robe during a brief flirtation between 2 scribes who thought medical texts were romantic. That was a long week. You jot a terse note, Galen missing. Again, suspect misfiling or divine theft, recheck later. You continue the rounds, passing the Curiosities Corner, a shelf that contains everything from an Arabic astrolabe diagram to a folded parchment with what appears to be instructions for constructing a small boat from reeds and wax. No one knows who copied it, probably someone with very specific weekend plans. At one point, you run a fingertip along a codex of patristic commentary and feel something odd, a ripple under the leather. You open it gently. Hidden between the folios, a dried violet pressed flat and brittle. Someone, long ago, thought this bit of beauty belonged here. You close the book carefully, not removing the flower. It's a library. Things are allowed to be quiet and mysterious. The last aisle is the trickiest. The oldest manuscripts are here. Dark parchment, cracked bindings, pages inked in a script so ancient that only 2 people in the room can read it fluently. You're one of them. The other is asleep against a windowsill with a wax blotter resting on his face. You tug the scroll drawers open carefully, inspecting the contents. Most are stable, but one, De Spiritu Sancto, is curling at the edges. Humidity, age. Or maybe the manuscript just resents its shelf neighbour, a loud and flashy cosmology scroll bound in peacock blue leather. Manuscripts have personalities. You've learned that. You jot another note. Recommend rebinding or exile of peacock scroll for harmony restoration. Returning to your desk, you cross-reference your marks with yesterday's inventory, mostly stable. A few issues. One possible theft, though probably just a misshelving by Basilius after his eyes went cross during copying hour, and then you hear it. A muffled curse, followed by the clatter of a stool. You turn sharply. At the far end of the scriptorium, Maria stands beside Alexios's desk, arms crossed, face like thunder. Alexios, meanwhile, is holding a manuscript with a look of sheepish horror. "What did you do?" Maria asks, not yelling, but radiating enough menace to make the cat slink under a bench. "I thought it was homilies on Luke," Alexios mumbles, "but it might be laws of maritime weights and measures." "You wrote cross-references to the Gospel of John in a trade manual," Maria hisses. You step in. "Breathe," you say gently. "We've all misfiled before. Remember Demetrios's disaster with the funeral hymns and erotic poetry?" Maria sighs. "Yes." "The sensual lamentation." "I'll fix it," Alexios says quickly. "I'll rewrite the whole section." "You'll copy it," you correct him, "from Maria's clean copy, and you'll buy her bread tomorrow." Alexios nods. Maria doesn't smile, but she does relax, slightly. The tension break. You make a note in your log, misfiled gospel, reassigned copy duty. Note, never store homilies and harbour tax law side by side. Just as you sit back down, a pigeon flutters past the open window and lands on the sill. A message cylinder tied to its leg. You gently reach out, detach the scroll, and read, "To the esteemed guardian of the Palace Library, please advise whether scroll number 213b, Aristotle, short commentary, fire damage, was loaned to the monastery of Cintern." "Mamas, if not, we may have a problem." You blink, scroll 213b, definitely not on the loan list. That's one of your pride pieces, salvaged after a fire, restored lovingly by Ioannis over several months, and catalogued with 3 layers of protective sheathing. You check the shelf, empty. Oh no, a stolen scroll, or perhaps borrowed by someone with very bad paperwork. You glance toward the others. No one's looking, just the usual mess of quills, complaints, and parchment. You stare at the pigeon, who stares back like it's your fault. You sigh and whisper, "Not again." Section 8. You sit still for a long moment, the scroll in your hand, the pigeon still perched like an accusatory statue on the sill. Outside, the courtyard bustles. Inside, the scriptorium resumes its quiet chorus. You, meanwhile, are trying to remember the last time anyone mentioned scroll 213b. Fire-damaged Aristotle, commentary on Meteorologica, if your memory serves. Last logged 6 weeks ago, definitely not loaned out. You mutter, either someone's lying or someone's very confused. You rise and head toward your private storage drawer, a locked, slightly warped chest where you keep the things too important, too fragile, or too likely to go missing in plain sight. You thumb through the small vellum tags. Scroll 213b is not there. You open the main logbook and double-check. Yes, received from the Cathedral Library after the fire, restored, rebound, shelved in Vault Section C, no mention of a loan. No signature authorizing a transfer, no monastery seal. You exhale slowly. Fact: Byzantine scrolls were sometimes tracked via unique numbering systems that relied on mnemonic sequences, often poems or psalms, to aid memory. Fringe tidbit: one librarian reportedly used a system based on the number of his missing teeth. Historians still argue whether the inconsistency of medieval cataloguing was a result of poor systems or just bad handwriting. You return to the scriptorium, pigeon message in hand. Maria notices your expression. "What's vanished this time?" she asks without looking up. "Aristotle." She freezes. "Again?" You nod. "Possibly to the monastery of St. Mamas." She lets out a long, slow sigh. "They took my Anabasis last year and claimed it was on spiritual retreat." Alexios perks up. "Maybe the scrolls want to leave." "Ever think of that?" You don't respond. You're already drafting a reply on the wax tablet to the Brothers of St. Mamas. Scroll 203b has not been officially loaned. Please confirm current location. Kindly return at once or prepare to negotiate. With wine, lots of wine, you tie the scroll to the pigeon's leg, murmur a half-hearted blessing, and send it off. The pigeon departs with the grace of a slightly hungover angel. You return to your seat, only to see Theophilos standing awkwardly near the storage alcove, holding something. "What's that?" you ask. "You." "I found this behind the cabinet," he mutters, holding up a brittle scroll tube. The leather is flaking like old onion skin. You take it gingerly and unroll a portion, faded ink, the script angular and cramped. You blink. It's a heavily annotated version of the Book of Daniel, complete with marginal interpretations in Greek, Syriac, and, oddly, Old Church Slavonic. You look at Theophilos. "That shouldn't be here," he shrugs. "There's a date inside, 842 AD. Iconoclast period," you mutter. "No wonder it's hidden. Fact, during the Byzantine iconoclasm, many religious texts were either destroyed or concealed to protect their contents. Fringe tidbit. Some scribes encoded scriptures into musical notations or poetic forms to sneak them past censors. Historians still argue whether many of these hidden texts were acts of resistance or simple academic hoarding. You log the rediscovery. You note the location, the damage, the surprising presence of 3 languages, then you carefully rewrap it and lock it inside the curiosities chest. You'll deal with it later, when your list of emergencies is shorter than a laundry line in Lent. Then you remember, today's schedule includes a visit from the monks. Wonderful. You head toward the side chamber, a smoky, narrow room filled with cushions that smell faintly of roasted barley and damp wool. It's where negotiations happen, and where scrolls sometimes go to vanish. Sure enough, they're already waiting. 2 monks from St. Mama's, each with a beard as long as a lamppost shadow and expressions so serene it makes you suspicious. "Peace be upon you," says the older one, smiling like someone who's about to ask for your best scroll in exchange for turnip wine. You nod. "Peace and accountability," he chuckles. "We may have received something, prematurely, a scroll, fire-damaged." "Aristotle?" "We didn't send it," you say calmly. "Perhaps," he says, producing a small sack. "This will help smooth things." You open it. A rolled scroll. Thin. Curious, smells of rosemary and old fish. You unroll the top. It's an alchemical recipe. You scan the lines. To turn base lead to shimmering silver, begin with moonlight, crushed iris petals, and the size of a virgin widow. You raise an eyebrow. "We offer this in exchange," the monk says, "for the inconvenience." "You want to trade an imperial scroll for poetry and potion instructions?" He beams. "Knowledge is its own currency." You pause. "Is this your handwriting?" His grin falters. You hand the scroll back. "Return the Aristotle, then we'll talk." The monks sigh. They rise. They promise to investigate. You walk them out with a half-smile, wondering how many scrolls have quietly been investigated into permanent residence at monasteries over the years. Back in the scriptorium, the cat has taken your seat. You pick him up. He protests. You sit. Maria looks over. "Did they admit it?" "Not directly," you reply, "but they offered me a scroll promising to turn salt into sapphires." "Useful," she says dryly, "if you're a magician with too much time." You chuckle and resume your logs. Scrolls go missing. Margins get muddled, quills snap, pigeons bring gossip. But the library endures. Because of you, because of the ones who show up daily, copy faithfully, mutter passionately, and return tomorrow. You write in your own small ledger, Aristotle, presumed borrowed. Daniel, resurrected. Monks, slippery. Cat, still judgmental, just another quiet drama in the life of a Byzantine librarian. Section 9. Lunch is a ritual. Not a feast, never that, but a ritual nonetheless. At midday, the scriptorium begins to loosen, shoulders sag, ink pots are corked, and the smell of warm parchment is replaced by onions, always onions. You wipe your hands on a cloth and step into the courtyard, squinting against the sun as it bounces off terracotta tiles and 1,000 years of stone. The others file out behind you, some stretching arms, others carrying satchels of bread and olives like small reliquaries. You sit beneath the fig tree again, your preferred spot. It leans just enough to provide shade, and occasionally, if the wind is kind, a fig drops gently into your lap like a gift from the heavens. Today, no fig. Instead, you've brought a modest satchel, a hunk of yesterday's barley bread, resilient as ever, a wedge of goat cheese, stubbornly aromatic, and a small wrapped pouch of pickled onions. Maria joins you, pulling her veil back slightly and exhaling with the weight of someone who's translated through 3 metaphysical planes before lunch. He's climbing a mountain of fire now, she mutters, referring to the Zoroastrian scroll, and asking questions about the stars. I'm beginning to suspect he's lost. You offer her a bit of your cheese. She declines politely, then steals half your bread anyway. Alexios plops down on the grass nearby, chewing dried figs and holding up a sliver of parchment with inky smudges. Who here thinks Chrysostom could out-argue Cicero? A beat of silence. You blink, there it is, the lunchtime debate. Fact: John Chrysostom, famed preacher of Constantinople, was known for his moralistic fire and literary rhythm. Fringe tidbit: some manuscripts claim he once spoke so long during a sermon that half the congregation passed out from standing too long. Historians still argue whether Chrysostom's influence matched that of classical rhetoricians, or merely impressed more bishops. Maria rolls her eyes. Cicero structured logic like a mason lays bricks. Chrysostom is all incense and thunder. Theophilos leans in. But Chrysostom stirs the heart. Cicero flatters the Senate. Cicero, Alexios declares, waving his fig, could end a war with a metaphor. And Chrysostom, you counter, could start a revival with a whisper. Cicero, Chrysostom. Both are dead, Basilius mutters, chewing a boiled egg. And neither had to copy their own speeches by hand. Silence. Laughter. Even the cat lets out a yawn from a sunlit windowsill. The debate fades, replaced by quieter moments. Shared bites of fig, talk of weather, dreams of rest days that never quite arrive. You lean back against the fig tree and close your eyes for a moment. The courtyard buzzes gently. Distant sandals on stone, a donkey braying 2 streets over, pigeons squabbling under the eaves, and then a thud. You open one eye. Maria's satchel has tipped, spilling a scroll into the grass. Not hers. Not from the palace either. You sit up. The scroll's casing is different, darker wood, capped in bronze. You recognize the design, monastery work, old, from Cappadocia, if the floral engraving is anything to go by. Where did this come from, you ask? Maria frowns. It was in with the treatise this morning. I assumed it was part of the translation packet. You examine the scroll more closely. The seal is unbroken, the casing dust-covered and scratched. You uncap it and unfurl just enough to read. Revelations of the Prophetess, translated by unknown hand. A silence falls. Prophetic texts are sensitive, dangerous, depending on the contents. Some get banned. Others get copied quietly and slipped into prayer books, quoted at taverns or whispered in bathhouses. Fact: the Byzantine Empire tolerated many spiritual texts but grew cautious of anything suggesting apocalyptic prophecy outside canonical scripture. Fringe tidbit: in one case, an anonymous scroll predicting the fall of the purple-clad rulers led to a brief investigation and several unfortunate haircuts. Historians still argue whether many of these prophecies were legitimate theology or coded political criticism. You look up. This wasn't on any list. Maria's eyes narrow. Should we open it? We already have, you say quietly. Now we have to decide what to do with it. You rewrap the scroll carefully and place it back in her satchel. Keep it with the imperial packet. For now. You don't say what you're thinking, that a scroll like this doesn't just slip into a palace delivery. Someone wanted it here, wanted you to read it. The question is, why? Lunch ends in quiet tension. Back inside, the scriptorium feels changed, not louder, not busier, just more alert. Like the walls heard everything and now wait for what comes next. You sit again at your desk, nibbling the last of your cheese, scribbling a note in your personal log, prophetic scroll, unscheduled, likely deliberate inclusion. Do not catalogue yet. Outside, the sun begins its slow slide behind the rooftops. Shadows stretch like ink across the flagstones. And somewhere, perhaps still watching, the person who sent that scroll walks among the crowd, robes trailing dust, face unreadable. You stare out the window and whisper, "Let's hope this one isn't true." Section 10. You sit very still at your desk, listening, not just to the scratch of pens or the flick of parchment, but to the strange hush that settles when questions outnumber answers. The mystery scroll rests a few feet away in Maria's satchel, sealed again, but its presence lingers in the room like the aftertaste of overly sweet wine. Nobody talks about it, not aloud, yet you notice glances, sideways, cautious, thoughtful. The afternoon sunlight filters in at an angle now, golden and thick, and the temperature in the scriptorium rises just enough to make the ink bleed ever so slightly on dry parchment. You make a quiet circuit of the room, checking for smudges and spilled sand, gently adjusting a too-close lamp, reminding Theophilos to rest his eyes between chapters. Then Basil raises a hand. "Master," he says, waving a crumpled page. "I think I found Scythia." You pause. "Scythia?" He nods solemnly, tapping his latest assignment. A map copied from an ancient Roman original, recently gifted by a merchant from Trebizond. Basil has been redrawing it all week, struggling to determine whether the large brown shape at the top was a hill, a bear, or a poorly rendered cloud. You walk over and examine the work. To your surprise, it does look more like a map now. The river flows in a reasonable direction, and the town names have been adjusted, though one still reads suspiciously like Gotopolis. You point. "Is this Scythia?" "I think so," Basil says proudly. "Or maybe Moesia. The ink was smeared, or possibly jam." You raise a brow. Fact, Byzantine cartography often relied on earlier Roman sources, but names, borders, and even entire landmarks were regularly misinterpreted by copyists. Fringe tidbit. A famous 11th century map included an island labelled Land of Talking Dogs, likely due to a mistranslation of a Syriac traveller's tale. Historians still argue whether medieval maps were meant for navigation or simply contemplation. You nod. "Well done. Try to label the forests next." "And double-check the hill bear," he beams. "I will, and I'm adding tiny trees." "Why?" "So travellers know there are trees." You smile. It's not logic, but it's beautiful. As you move back toward your desk, a whisper reaches your ears. Maria and Alexios, mid-discussion over the Zoroastrian manuscript. "It says here the soul crosses a bridge made of thought," Maria murmurs. "Thin as a hair, sharper than a blade." Alexios, eyes wide, nods. "And beneath it, hell, a lake of fire and bees? Possibly bees, or serpents. Or sorrow." She sighs. "It's all metaphor. Probably." You sit, listening to the quiet debates unfold, on philosophy, translation, punctuation. Someone sneezes. A cat jumps down from a shelf. You flick a splatter of ink from the edge of your desk, watching the ripple it leaves on the old grain of the wood. Then you hear it, knocking, not on the door, but the window. You turn. It's a bird, but not a pigeon. A hawk. You rise and move carefully toward the ledge. The hawk tilts its head. Around its leg, a small scroll, wrapped in red thread. You open the window gently. The bird flutters back, then steps forward. You remove the scroll. Inside, "We saw it too. Do not translate aloud." He waits. S.A. You close your eyes for a long breath. A shiver passes down your spine. Who is S.A.? How did they know? And what do they mean? He waits. You return to your desk and slide the message into your personal journal, between the pages labelled curiosities and warnings. You don't show the others. Instead, you turn back to the scroll inventory, hoping for normalcy. You review today's logs: damaged Gospel of Luke, missing Galen, recovered Book of Daniel, dubious Scythian map, alchemical trade failure, prophetic smuggling, and it's only mid-afternoon. You barely notice the boy entering the room, one of the newer apprentices. He stands silently for a moment, holding something behind his back. You look up. "Yes?" He shuffles forward. "I found this." He reveals a scrap of parchment, small, torn, ink still wet. You read the words. The bridge is real. He walks already. There is no signature, no handwriting match. You lock it in your drawer. The scriptorium continues as if none of this has happened. Fact, superstition in Byzantine intellectual circles often blurred with scholarship. Prophetic warnings and coded omens were catalogued alongside scientific texts. Fringe tidbit. One scholar once claimed to have discovered a pattern in lost scroll appearances that matched lunar cycles and cathedral bell tones. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were sincere or simply products of long hours and too much lamp oil. You rub your eyes and glance toward the western window. The light is beginning to dim. The room grows softer, quieter. Even the cat has curled into a lump of fur and shadow beneath the shelf labelled Ecclesiastical Miscellany. Your hand rests on the desk. You feel the grain of the wood, worn smooth by decades of scribes just like you, guardians. Watchers, stewards of truth. And you wonder, if this scroll really contains a prophecy, who is it meant for? Because it found you. Section 11. Late afternoon in the scriptorium smells like ink, lamp oil, and quiet panic. You've just finished recording a note about the Hawk message, carefully coded in case anyone finds your personal log, and you're about to check on Basil's tree-covered version of Scythia when a loud flutter breaks the silence. Another pigeon, but this one is different. It's missing feathers on one wing, flies crookedly, and crash lands on the edge of Alexios's desk like a drunk actor exiting stage left. Everyone stops. The room falls into a suspended hush. The message tube is chipped. You walk over, unfasten the scroll, and read aloud because habits die hard. The scroll was never authorized. Burn it. This is not a request. Signed, no one. You lower the scroll. Maria stares. Is this still about the prophecy? You nod slowly. Seems like it. Alexios leans forward. Should we tell the archivist, the imperial steward? We should burn the scroll, Basilius mutters from behind a stack of hymnals. You shake your head. We don't burn what we haven't read. The cat meows. It feels like a comment. You don't read the message again. You slip it into a drawer beside the first one. This pigeon, clearly exhausted, hops off the desk and waddles behind a bookshelf. You let it go. It's done enough. You sit. And then it hits you. What if the scroll isn't meant to be read? What if it's meant to be watched? You pull Maria aside. Fetch the scroll. She does. You unroll it again on the reading table, slowly this time. You light a nearby lamp and tilt it sideways. Ancient ink glints faintly, not black, not brown, a reddish shimmer like dried blood or crushed pomegranate, and the writing, it changes. Only slightly, but enough. Look, you whisper. The main body of text is still legible. The soul will cross flame and wind to be judged. But in the lower corner, something new appears. A symbol. No, a name, written so faintly you almost miss it. Heliodorus. You freeze. Fact. Heliodorus was a semi-mythic figure in Byzantine mystical circles, rumoured to be a seer, a sage, and a banished heretic all at once. His writings were said to predict palace upheavals and natural disasters. Fringe tidbit. One chronicle claimed he vanished during a solar eclipse, mid-lecture, in front of 20 students. Historians still argue whether he ever existed or was simply an amalgam of many prophetic eccentrics. You glance at Maria. We keep this quiet, just for now. She nods, pale but steady. I'll secure it with the imperial scrolls. Deep shelf. Behind the misfiled maritime law? She nods again. Exactly. Crisis half averted, you try to redirect your thoughts toward routine. Inventory updates. Inkpot refills. Someone's dropped wax on the margin of a psalter again. You scrape it off with your penknife, quietly muttering that the psalms have survived fire, flood, and now sloppy handwriting. Then, just as you begin to relax, another message arrives, but not by bird. A young page from the outer court enters quietly, carrying a folded parchment. His sandals squish. He's run through water. Or worse, he hands you the note with trembling hands and whispers, "They're asking about your scrolls, the purple chamberlain." He doesn't wait for a reply. You read the note. It's short. Inventory check ordered. This evening, send scroll lists and unusual findings. You sigh. You knew it. The imperial court, like a cat, always appears disinterested until it smells something worth watching. Then suddenly it's underfoot, sniffing everything, knocking precious items off shelves, pretending it meant nothing by it. Maria watches you from her seat. You mouth silently. Burn it? She shrugs, a very Byzantine response. Non-committal, possibly treasonous, definitely wise. You gather the scrolls, not all of them, just the safe ones. The psalters, the commentaries, the herbal cures for foot rot. You leave out Heliodorus, you leave out the prophecy. You leave out the one with the bridge of thought. Instead, you pen a list that includes 4 psalters, 2 volumes of Basil the Great's letters, 1 scroll on naval taxation, 1 map of Scythia, suspiciously accurate. You add a note. Other scrolls under repair or recataloguing. Will send update soon. You send it via the exhausted pigeon. He flaps off without enthusiasm, probably hoping this is his last errand of the day. Then you return to the task you've been putting off, deciphering the map. Basil's map, bizarre as it is, now seems oddly relevant. It shares certain symbols, tiny, obscure ones in the margin, with those on the prophetic scroll. The same mountain. The same half circle, like an eclipse. The same word in faded Greek, metanoia, repentance. Is it just coincidence? Or did whoever sent that map know what was in the scroll? You stay late, past when the lamps begin to gutter, past when the scribes trickle home in pairs and yawns. You sit, alone in the scriptorium, lit only by the flame of one faithful lamp. The scroll rests beside you, silent. Still, unread, and yet somehow speaking. You write one final note before heading home. If I vanish tomorrow, let them know. The scroll spoke first. Section 12. The first thing you hear the next morning is the soft clink of keys, your own. You'd fallen asleep holding them, curled awkwardly on your bench, still half-dressed in yesterday's cloak. The lamp beside you burned itself out during the night, leaving a dark puddle of wax and a small scorch mark in your logbook. You run your fingers over the blackened edge, as if that might erase the evidence. A new day. A new layer of mystery, and a few joints that now crack like damaged floorboards as you rise. Outside, Constantinople stirs. Church bells in the forum clang faintly over the stone rooftops. A baker's cart rattles along the lower street. Somewhere far off, a crier calls out the day's news, likely exaggerated, definitely entertaining. But inside the library, it's silent, too silent. You pace the scriptorium, taking stock. The lamps are cold, the benches are empty, even the cat is missing. You find its usual cushion still warm, but no feline in sight. You're the first one here. Again. And for a moment, you're not sure you mind. You unroll the Heliodorus scroll one more time, not to read, no, not yet, but just to look. The ink, now dry and brittle, seems to pulse faintly in the low light, as if still waking up. You resist the urge to whisper something to it. You already talk to books. You don't need to start confiding in them. Then the first knock. You flinch, heart thudding. It's just Alexios, early for once, holding a bundle of fresh vellum and a very suspicious cup of what he claims is morning broth. You wave him in. Soon, the rest follow. Maria, Theophilos, Basilius, even the quiet apprentice with the good memory and terrible penmanship. Everyone arrives with that same cautious energy, as if each one dreamed something strange. No one mentions the scroll, not aloud. But everyone works differently today. Maria copies her Zoroastrian passage in total silence, lips pressed tight. Alexios hums, nervous, off-key. Theophilos keeps glancing over his shoulder, and Basilius actually double-checks his work, which is frankly unprecedented. You decide it's time to distract them. Today, you announce, we have a challenge. A few heads lift. We've been asked to decipher a military treatise written in what I can only describe as theological shorthand. Maria blinks. Wait, military strategy? In biblical metaphor? You nod. Exactly. It was recovered from a chapel in Bithynia and misfiled under prayer requests. Alexios snorts. You distribute the scrolls. The scribes dive in with grateful enthusiasm, relieved to have something concrete, ridiculous maybe, but blessedly normal, to occupy their minds. The treatise compares siege warfare to divine judgment, with tactics like flanking maneuvers of the righteous and fortifying the gates of faith. Fact: Byzantine military texts often adopted theological language to justify campaigns as sacred duty. Fringe tidbit: one manual recommends fasting before battle to weaken the influence of Saturn, which presumably didn't help morale. Historians still argue whether this blending of faith and warfare was strategic piety or a genuine worldview. As you oversee their progress, a runner appears at the door, thin, winded, and very, very young. He bows. Message from the monastery of St. Mamas. You take the scroll, it's sealed in brown wax. You break it carefully. We regret our overreach. The scroll was not meant for the Imperial Archive. It was copied in error from a voice that should not speak again. Do what must be done. May silence protect you. No signature. But someone had the presence of mind to add a line in faint Syriac at the bottom. Do not read it aloud near stone. You read that line 3 times. You glance around. You are surrounded by stone. Walls, floor, vaulted ceiling. Shelves, statues, even the pillars outside. Constantinople is a city of carved rock and whispered history. You feel it then, not fear. Not exactly. A deep, pressing awareness. You send Maria to re-shelve the scroll, now wrapped in multiple layers of cloth, sealed in wax, tucked inside a codex of imperial tax codes no one ever reads. You do not destroy it, not yet, because you need to understand why this text arrived. Why you were the one to receive it, why the name Heliodorus keeps surfacing in corners of maps and margins of psalters, and then the knock comes. 3 slow raps on the door, not a runner, not a scribe. A silhouette. You open it with caution. It's a monk. But not from the palace monasteries. His robes are dusted with red sand, his eyes are sunken. He speaks in a quiet, unaccented Greek. I have come for the bridge, he says. You blink. The what? The bridge of thought, the one that sharpens, the one that burns. He smiles, a little too gently. You do not invite him in. Instead you nod. I've heard of it, you say. He bows. Then you know it cannot remain here. You close the door. Inside, the scribes continue working. Copying, muttering, sipping broth, mislabeling Moesia, all the usual things. Outside, the monk waits a little longer. Then he's gone. You write a note in your private log. They're coming for the bridge. You underline it. Twice. Section 13. The light in the scriptorium begins to tilt. Afternoon slips quietly into that strange golden haze just before evening, when the world feels softer, older, and more forgiving. It's the hour when parchment crackles a little louder, when your eyes blur more quickly, and when the ink begins to dry before you've finished the stroke. Everyone feels it, you do too. Still, there's no time to slow down. The day's main copying work resumes, a block of theological commentary from Gregory of Nyssa, a smattering of imperial decrees that contradict one another gloriously, and the last leg of a badly faded transcript of De Anima that Alexios insists contains secret diagrams, though everyone else just sees blobs. You assign scribes their portions, you check their reads, you adjust the spacing between columns and ensure the scribes don't abbreviate words like Christ in a way that offends the patriarch. You are the conductor again, coaxing harmony out of ink and discipline, and then come the grumbles. First from Demetrios, who flings down his pen with flair. This ink is cursed, he says. You glance over. Cursed how? It keeps blotting. Look. He points to a psalm he's copying. Sure enough, halfway through, the Lord is my light and my salvation. There's a dark, spreading puddle like a bruised star. He's used the new ink blend from Ioannis, the one with pomegranate tannin. You take the pen, dip it, and try a few words. No blot. You glance at Demetrios. Did you stir it? He blinks. Stir? Always stir, you say. Fact, medieval ink had to be stirred regularly to keep sediment from settling, especially if it contained organic ingredients like tannins or soot. Fringe tidbit. One recipe advised stirring with a twig from a fig tree on the 3rd day of the moon to prevent misfortune. Historians still argue whether the elaborate rituals around ink making were science, superstition, or simply scribal boredom. You assign him a fresh pot and a spoon. Order is restored, but then Alexios raises his hand. Master, he says slowly, have you looked at the diagrams in this copy of De Anima? You frown. They were smudged. Yes, he replies, but also not. He spreads the page wide on his desk. Everyone leans in. At first glance, it's just scribbles, but with the light at a certain angle, the smudges resolve into lines, curves actually, arcs that connect. Shapes. It's a face, Maria whispers, and it is. Subtle, ghostly, not drawn in ink, but perhaps pressed into the parchment somehow, so faintly it only appears in raking light. The face is long, angular, eyes wide. And something about it feels wrong, not evil, just off. Alexios adds, there's more, on the next page. Sure enough, the next folio contains another shape, this time what looks like a hand, open but not welcoming. Almost reaching, or warning, you run your hand over the parchment. The texture's uneven. Someone embedded these marks with pressure, not pigment. I've never seen anything like this, you mutter. Fact, certain scribes experimented with dry illustration methods, scoring, embossing, and pressure etching into vellum to preserve secret shapes or enhance images with invisible contours. Fringe tidbit. One 10th century text claimed a monk illustrated a manuscript with only his fingernails, guided by the spirit. Historians still argue whether these stories reflect real techniques or deeply misunderstood miracles. You stare at the face again. I think this came from the same monastery, Maria says quietly. St. Mama's. Same paper, same spine threading, same smell. You nod. You don't say the obvious thought that this wasn't an accident. That someone wanted these images hidden in plain sight. That the prophetic scroll, the warnings, the face in the parchment, they're connected, but you're already convinced. You jot a quick note in your log. Faces in Dianima, light revealed, from same hand. You look up. Let's keep these separate, you say. Index them, yes, but don't copy, just observe. For now, your scribes nod. They know the tone in your voice. It's the tone you use when something is out of bounds. You turn back to your desk. You mean to sit, but you don't. You move toward the vault instead. The main scroll vault is your most sacred space. Rows of shelves behind a locked iron gate. No windows, just lamplight and reverence. You unlock the gate slowly, careful not to let it creak too much. The smell here is different, older, more serious. It smells like things you don't dare misplace. You retrieve a single object, a folio you recovered years ago from the ruins of an Anatolian chapel. The script was unreadable then, but now, you set it beside Dianima. The symbols match. Perfectly. You stare at the 2 pages, then a shadow passes the door. You look up sharply. Nothing. You rise, step into the hall. The torches flicker slightly, the stone floor cold even through your sandals. You call out softly, "Is someone there?" No answer. You return inside. The scribes glance up, then back down. The cat has returned, silent, calm, and curled up beside the psalms again, tail flicking. You whisper to yourself, the bridge. The hand, the face, the flame. And for the first time in years, you feel something ancient inside the library stir. Not in fear, not in anger, just waiting. Section 14. As you extinguish the first of the oil lamps near the eastern shelf, a drop of wax falls and hardens instantly on the cold stone floor. You scrape it up with your thumbnail. It's the 6th today. Maybe 7th. You've stopped counting. Candle wax is as much a part of your daily life as ink, dust, and the gentle hum of secrets no one wants to say aloud. The sun is fading outside now. The city settles into a softer, slower rhythm. Distant voices grow quieter. Market stalls close. The wind carries the smell of baked bread and sea salt from the harbours, blending with the faint iron tang of ink and age that permeates every shelf in this place. You take one last pass through the scriptorium. Basilius is dozing again, head on his arm, a small pool of ink creeping steadily across his notes. You gently nudge his shoulder. He startles, wipes his chin, and mutters something about divine inspiration through dreams. You hand him a rag and walk away. Maria is still at her bench, fingers smudged, eyes steady. She's been rewriting a single passage for nearly an hour now, translating each line of the fire bridge vision like she's stepping over it herself. She hasn't said anything since the afternoon, but you can tell she's close to seeing something in the text that even the original author didn't notice. Alexios, surprisingly productive, is copying the treatise on harmony, an essay linking music theory to cosmology. He hums softly as he works, pausing every so often to scribble a note in the margin that he thinks is clever. Most of them are. Fact. Many Byzantine scribes used the margins not just for glosses but for jokes, poems, prayers, even arguments with previous readers. Fringe tidbit. One scroll contains a margin scrawl that simply reads, "I disagree, you are a donkey." Historians still argue whether marginalia should be studied as literary supplements or passive-aggressive scribal graffiti. You find yourself smiling as you check each lamp one by one, snuffing their flames with a worn bronze cone. The shadows gather, slowly at first, then all at once. The golden pools of light vanish. The library returns to a darker state, its natural state, a place of memory, silence, and half-whispered truths. You round a corner and pause. There, in the alcove beside the north shelves, a small pile of wax has pooled beneath a manuscript. A taper, left burning too long, has melted through its own holder. The drip line trails onto the wooden reading bench, and worse, onto the edge of the manuscript itself. You rush forward, heart quickening. The wax has landed squarely on a vellum page of the imperial genealogy chart, a document already riddled with errors, family feuds, and the names of emperors so unpopular that their likenesses were scraped off coins. You mutter something not quite holy. Grabbing your repair kit, you begin gently heating the wax with a spoon warmed by the coals from the hearth, slow, careful. A moment too long, and you'll scorch the page. Too quick, and the wax will smear, taking ink with it. As you work, you whisper a prayer to Saint Tryphon, unofficial patron of archivists and impossible messes. The wax lifts piece by piece, and you slide it onto a cloth. Then you see it, beneath the wax. A faint outline, letters, a phrase. He was not the first. You freeze. That text is not part of the genealogy. You run your finger lightly over it. The letters are in the same hand as the prophetic scroll, fainter, almost secret. But definitely there. You whisper aloud. Who? No answer. Only the sound of the hearth cracking. Fact. It was not uncommon for scribes to insert hidden messages into documents, codes, curses, or sometimes personal confessions buried between lines of royal decrees. Fringe tidbit. One obscure scribe once claimed to have hidden the full lyrics of a drinking song inside the margins of Justinian's law codes. Historians still argue whether these insertions were acts of rebellion or lonely scribes talking to the future. You write a new entry in your personal log. Message under wax, he was not the first. Genealogy chart compromised. Suggest cross-referencing family lines with Heliodorus text. You look up. The room has grown dim, almost blue in the failing light. Only 2 lamps remain, one beside Alexios, one near Maria. You snuff yours. Only their 2 golden pools remain. You glance at the main scroll vault. Should you lock the Heliodorus scroll away for good, or should you read it, just once? Just enough to understand. Then Theophilos speaks, quiet. Clear. I saw that face last night. You turn. Everyone else looks up. He continues, in my dream, the one in Dianima, the long face. The wide eyes, it was standing on the bridge. Maria nods. I've dreamed it too. And the flame, and the voice. Alexios adds, I haven't dreamed anything. A pause. But I feel it. You exhale slowly. The whole room is awake now in a new way, not just alert, but attuned. The scroll did something, or is doing something, slowly, carefully. Like a tree rooting itself into the foundation of the library. You look around, hand on your keyring. We'll close early tonight, you say. No one protests. You snuff the last lamps. The door shuts with a soft echo. Outside, the air has cooled. The streets shimmer with torchlight and flickers from household fires. Constantinople exhales, massive and ancient, and you walk home with your thoughts buzzing like hornets in a jar. You do not take the scroll with you, but you dream of it. That night, the face from Dianima is waiting. And this time, it speaks your name. Section 15. Vespers bells ring softly across the city, and you wake still seated at your desk, not your bed. Not your home, still here. The library is dim, lit only by the final grey strokes of pre-dawn. The coals in the hearth have cooled to a soft orange pulse. Outside the windows, Constantinople is quiet, but not silent. You can hear it breathing, carts rolling over cobblestone, footsteps echoing through arcades, the faint cry of gulls circling the sea walls. You shift in your seat, your back protests, your neck's a mess. There's a faint smudge of ink on your left temple, and your fingers are stained so thoroughly it looks like you dipped them in shadow. And then you remember, it spoke your name. You don't want to write it down. Not yet. To do so would make it too real. Instead, you simply move, gathering papers and tools as if rearranging the outside world might quiet what's stirring inside. The others arrive slowly. Theophilos first, as always, now more withdrawn. He doesn't even offer his usual grunt. He sits, sharpens his pen, opens his psalter, begins. Then Maria, she's pale, quiet. She places a sealed parchment on your desk and says only, I copied the hidden page from Dianima. It's worse in daylight. She doesn't explain. You nod. Alexios stumbles in next, hair a mess, muttering, the bridge is real, the bridge is real, the bridge. You stop him gently with a hand on the shoulder. He startles like someone returning from a far journey, then quietly sits. No one says what's now understood. Something has changed. The scroll is not just a message, it's a door. And someone, or something, wants it opened. You take your keyring, select the long bronze one with the double notches, rarely used, and move toward the far cabinet, the one behind the thick tapestry, marked only with a faded symbol of a closed eye. The quiet cabinet. It contains records of strange things. You've added to it over the years, a half-scorched codex containing numbers that glow faintly in moonlight, a hymnal with lyrics that seem to rewrite themselves on feast days, a fragment of a saint's biography that describes events from the future. You open it and place the Heliodorus scroll beside these curiosities. You do not lock the cabinet. Not yet, because part of you is still waiting for an answer. You return to your desk. On it, a stack of requested documents waits: imperial tax records, a genealogy revision because Emperor Romanos II insists he is descended from Alexander the Great, and a complaint from the military scribes that their ink supply smells demonic. Routine. Comforting. You pick up a quill. You don't write. Instead, you glance again at Maria's sealed parchment. You open it carefully. The copy she's made is perfect. Too perfect. The hidden face, rendered in faint grey lines, has been redrawn with such accuracy that you feel it watching you. The eye on the left is slightly larger. The mouth is not closed, but slightly parted. If you didn't know better, you'd swear it had changed since last night. Beneath it, she has written in tiny script, "It is not a warning. It is a memory." You lean back in your chair. You wonder, whose memory? Yours. The scribes or the libraries? Fact, some Byzantine scholars believed libraries were not just collections of books, but living receptacles of memory. A few even argued that copying certain texts could embed the spirit of the original scribe into the ink itself. Fringe tidbit: a controversial cleric once claimed that each manuscript had its own guardian demon who ensured its survival across centuries. Historians still argue whether this was metaphor or whispered doctrine. You look around at your scribes, quiet, working, or pretending to, each one drawn in, each one now part of something older and deeper than copying scripture or fixing footnotes. The bridge, they said, was sharper than a blade. You now wonder if it's also longer than you thought, stretching not just between soul and judgment, but across time and across memory and across the places where ink dries over forgotten truths. You glance toward the window. A shadow moves. Not a person, but something, a flutter of cloth. A shape too tall, too still. You walk to the window, but there's nothing outside, just empty courtyards. The last stars fading into morning. Back at your desk, you begin to write, not the scroll, not the decree, not the genealogy, but your own record. A private one. You entitle it Chronicle of the Unseen, and you begin, "Today, the scroll watched back. It whispered my name. It remembered something I haven't lived yet." We are copying more than texts. We are copying doors. You stop, quill hovering. Then you add, "And we are not alone." Section 16. The streets are almost empty by the time you leave the scriptorium. The sun hangs low, stretched thin across the domes and towers like the last thread of gold on a worn icon. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, though you are, but because you're delaying the moment you'll have to be alone with your thoughts. The scrolls, the face, the messages, they're too large to carry quietly, but you've always carried them. The city breathes around you. The scent of roasted garlic drifts from a tavern. A boy chases his dog across a market square. A pair of women haggle over dates, laughter tangled in their words. It's all so wonderfully normal, so untouched. You envy it. Then you pass the Hagia Sophia. You stop. The shadows from its great dome stretch like fingers across the street. You look up at the mosaics glittering in the twilight. You remember something a monk once told you. All knowledge bows in this place, but not all knowledge prays. You take a deep breath and keep walking. By the time you reach your home, a humble stone chamber tucked near the aqueduct, the stars are beginning to appear. You let yourself in, light a taper, and sit. You pour a cup of weak wine. You chew a bit of hard bread. You try not to think. It doesn't work. Because your thoughts aren't yours anymore. They've been stirred, opened, infected. That scroll didn't just carry ink. It carried intention. You unroll your private journal and begin adding to the chronicle of the unseen. The face in the hidden folio has changed again. The mouth is no longer parted. It is closed. Smiling, Maria reports a dream. The bridge collapsed. She woke with ink on her hands, no ink pot near her bed. The apprentice heard a whisper from the vault. It spoke a name he doesn't recognize. "I did." You stop, add nothing more, then you hear it. A soft knock, not at your front door, at the rear. The alley entrance. You freeze. No one uses that door. You rise, candle in hand, and cross the room quietly. You unbolt the door, heart thudding in your ears. A scroll. Alone, wrapped in linen, leaning against the doorframe like a gift or a curse. You bring it inside. The linen is clean, newly stitched with a thread pattern you don't recognize. You unwind it slowly. The scroll inside is small, narrow, with delicate writing. The seal is intact, a pressed wax symbol that looks like a bridge, but not the bridge from before. This one arches high and ends abruptly, cut clean in the middle. You don't break the seal, not yet. You wrap it again and place it on your writing desk beside your lamp. Then you sit, you breathe. And you wait. The next day, everything changes. You arrive at the library to find the doors already open. The lamp's already lit, and on your desk, a copy of the Imperial genealogy chart rewritten. The ink is still wet. At first you think it's a joke, but the names are wrong. Some are ancient. Some haven't been born yet. One is yours. You stare. You lift the sheet and read carefully. Scribe, librarian, witness. Gatekeeper. You fold the page and tuck it into your robe. Your scribes arrive slowly as usual, but today they say nothing. No questions, no jokes, no arguments over theology. They just sit, open scrolls. Begin to copy, as if they know. Mid-morning you hear footsteps. You look up. A visitor, not a monk. Not a messenger. A woman, robed in a deep indigo, with hair braided like coiled rope and eyes that carry centuries. She steps inside without asking permission, as if the library has always belonged to her. She stops at your desk, places a scroll on the table. It's old. Familiar? Heliodorus. You've seen it, she says. Her voice is quiet, not soft. You nod. And? I don't understand it, you reply. She smiles faintly. You're not meant to understand. You're meant to hold it, to preserve it. For whom? For us, she says. For the ones who will forget. She picks up the scroll and leaves. No one stops her. You want to protest? You want to chase her, but part of you knows the scroll doesn't belong to the library. Never did. It belonged to the bridge, and she's part of it. That evening you sit again by your hearth. You open the scroll that was left at your back door. You break the seal. Inside is a single line, written in your hand. You kept the memory alive. That was enough. You stare at it until the lamp flickers out. Then you close your eyes and let the bridge take you. Section 17. You don't remember falling asleep, but you remember the dream. You're standing in the scriptorium, alone, but not quite. The lamps glow with no flame. The scrolls hum gently, like a chorus of breathless voices. The walls seem taller, the shadows longer. And ahead of you, the bridge. Thin as a hair, sharp as a blade, it rises from the floor like it grew there, arching high into the dark above the shelves, above the city, above the world. You step forward. Your feet don't make a sound. At the base of the bridge lies a scroll. Familiar, worn, the Heliodorus scroll. You pick it up, it crumbles into light, and then you wake. The scriptorium is quiet today, not just the comfortable hush of a room full of focus, but something deeper, like the silence after a thunderclap. Or the breath held before a name is spoken. Maria doesn't speak much anymore. She copies, drinks tea, sometimes writes things in the margins that she later scratches out. You don't ask, you don't need to. Alexios has begun composing something. A hymn, he says, though no one's sure who it's meant for. He hums it quietly when he thinks no one's listening. You catch fragments, light, fire, voice, wind. Theophilos keeps to himself. But the circles under his eyes are heavier. He sleeps less, or perhaps dreams more. Basilius asked to copy the imperial chart again. You already finished it, you reminded him. I think I missed something, he said. You let him. You walk the stacks more now, touching the shelves lightly with your fingers as if listening for a pulse. Sometimes you think you hear the scrolls breathe. Sometimes you answer them. One afternoon you find a new note slipped under your desk blotter. No name. Just 4 words. He is watching still. You don't panic. You smile. Because by now you understand, the scroll wasn't just a message. It was an invitation, a mirror, a memory from the future or a voice from the past, or both. The lines have blurred, and now you are part of it. The bridge is no longer a place. It is a state of mind, a way of listening, of reading, of holding memory without owning it. The scroll is gone, but it has moved into you. That night, you return home early. The lamp oil burns low, the stars come out, and with them, the quiet hum of a city that has forgotten most of its own story. You pour wine, you eat bread, you light one taper. You sit, you write. I was the librarian, I tended the scrolls. I watched the words, and they watched me back. Then you add, I walked the bridge, and though I did not fall, I understand now why others chose to jump. And then you close your journal for the last time. You set your quill beside it, you lean back, you breathe. And in the candlelight, the shadows on your wall seem to form a shape, a figure, watching. Smiling, waiting. Wind down, the library grows quiet now. The last lamps are out, the scrolls are resting, the walls are still. All the ink has dried and the whispers of ancient voices have settled into dust. You're no longer holding anything, and nothing is holding you. Let the bridge fade, let the pages close, let the breath of Constantinople soften into sea wind and sleeping prayers. Tonight you're not a librarian, you're not a gatekeeper, you're just you, safe, still, and slowly sinking into rest. So close your eyes now, let the warmth of old parchment and candlelight wrap around you like a blanket. You did well. The scrolls are quiet, the words remember, and for now, there's nothing more to read. Sweet dreams.